Hi GSDSEF students. In this video, we will show you how to determine whether your project may require additional ISEF forms for SRC approval. Later videos will focus on how to fill out specific ISEF forms if you need them. We've already used a couple of acronyms, SRC and ISEF, so let's discuss what they mean first.
SRC stands for Scientific Review Committee. The Scientific Review Committee does a safety check for all projects. And ISEF stands for International Science and Engineering Fair. The Greater San Diego Science and Engineering Fair follows all rules and guidelines from ISEF.
We will use their additional forms for projects which require them. So when we say additional forms, we are referring to the ISEF forms. These additional forms will be the subject for the rest of this video.
To answer this question, we're going to start on the gsdsef.org homepage. On the top, we have the Students tab, and we're going to click on How to Participate. We're going to be focusing on Step 4 for this video, but on your own, be sure to read through Step 1, 2, and 3. So, since we're focusing on Step 4, we're going to be talking about determining whether your project needs additional forms. Please note in A, right here, many projects, additional forms may not be necessary.
Before we go through the process of determining if your project needs additional forms, please note, highlighted in the gold color, middle school projects requiring additional forms and all high school projects must go through SRC approval before starting experimentation. And you can see highlighted in green, middle school projects not requiring a certification form may start immediately with their projects. SRC approval will then be completed in January/February. Now we are going to go through Table 4B, which will allow you to determine if additional forms may be necessary.
So, if you answer yes to any question in the left column of this table, you will need required additional forms in that row, and possibly accessory forms. You will need to go through SRC approval before experimentation begins. So let's go over this top row. So if your project, and you go through this column and you see that your answer is yes, you will need to read the information and read the rules and guidelines column, and download and fill out or have filled out required forms in the next column, and possibly accessory forms listed on the column at the right. Anything in red will be links. So for example, I can click on this form and I have options to fill out this form if I need it in my project. So going back to the table, let's start with the first row. If your project takes place at a regulated research institution, then you'll need ISEF Form 1C, Regulated Research/Industrial Setting. Note that it is completed after research is done. This is not included in the SRC upload. Note that forms are linked in Table 4B, as I've already covered, and you'll need to get all these filled out by a supervising adult and get the necessary signature from the supervising adult. Specific information about how to fill out the forms will be included in later videos.
Now let's go back to Table 4B. If your project requires mentoring from a professional scientist or engineer, you will need ISEF Form 2, the Qualified Scientist Form. Again, you can download it, get it filled in, and get the necessary qualified scientist signature. Now let's move on to hazards. If your project involves hazards of any sort, biological and/or non-biological, you must look carefully at this entire row. First, read the How to Complete the Risk Assessment form. This will give you the necessary information whether your project has hazards. Again, Form 3, Risk Assessment, must be completed for hazards of any sort, non-biological and biological. Now take a look at the column on the right. If you have worked with a scientist, fill out Form 2. If you have worked in a lab, fill out Form 1C. If your project includes biological hazards, fill out either Form 6A, Potentially Hazardous Biological Agents, or Form 6B, Human and Animal Tissue Form. There will be a separate video about how to complete the risk assessment form and any accessory forms.
Now let's move on to ISEF Form 4, Human Participants. If your project involves human participants in any way, use forms in this row. So make sure you read the link in the guide and guidelines and pay particular attention to information in this resource right here. It will inform you about requirements for projects involving human participation.
Let's return to Table 4B. Please note that the two documents for a human participant project, ISEF Form 4, and a copy of your informed consent statement. Both must be uploaded for SRC approval, but many human participant projects will require further forms, so let's take a look at the right column. If you have designed your own survey or questionnaire, include a copy for the SRC upload. If you have worked with a scientist, have them fill out Form 2. If you have worked in a lab, fill out Form 1C. Also, if you have worked in a lab, an approval letter from their institutional review board is necessary. Should there be any risk to participants, physical or mental, include ISEF Form 3. There will be a separate video on how to complete these forms.
Now let's move on to projects involving live vertebrate animals, for which you'll use ISEF Forms 5A or 5B. We do strongly recommend to use invertebrates, such as insects and worms, in your projects. However, if you must use invertebrate animals, start with the how to complete the vertebrate animal form and read through this. And I'm going to highlight a particularly important resource here. This is going to be the vertebrate animal form, or you're going to use 5B if you used a research at a regulated research institution. And pay particular attention to information in number 1 in helping you determine which forms to use.
Now we're going to return to Table 4B. Form 5A is used for vertebrate animals used at school, home, or a field site. 5B is completed for research done at an RRI. It is done after research is completed and is not included in the SRC upload. There will be a separate video on how to complete these forms. With any project involving vertebrate animals, there might be additional forms beyond 5A or 5B. If you have worked with a scientist, have them fill out Form 2. If you have worked in a lab, fill out Form 1C. Also, if you worked in a lab, an approval letter from their institutional review board is necessary. And if there are any hazards, fill out Form 3.
So the next row is biological hazards. This is a repeat of the hazards row. We put it there in case anyone was looking only for biohazards. The hazards row contains all the necessary information. Finally, we come to, is your project a continuation or progression of a previous project? Notice it is completed after research is done and is not included in the SRC upload. Once required and accessory forms and documents are completed, attach them in your project information /SRC approval form in your GSDSEF student account. There will be a separate video about how to complete the project information /SRC approval form online.
Now let's do a quick review of the forms. If your project took place at a lab, a regulated research institution, use Form 1C, Regulated Research Industrial Setting. If your project required mentoring from a scientist or engineer, use ISEF Form 2, Qualified Scientist. If your project involved hazards of any sort, biological or non-biological, use ISEF Form 3, Risk Assessment. Depending on the project, you may need Form 1C, 2, and/or for biological projects, Forms 6A or 6B. If your project involves human participants, you must use ISEF Form 4, Human Participants, and include a copy of your informed consent statement. Depending on the project, you may also have to include a copy of your survey or questionnaire, ISEF Form 1C, 2, 3, and/or a letter from the institutional review board of the RRI. If your project is a continuation or progression of a previous project, use Form 7.
Thank you all for watching, and we hope this helps you out in your SRC approval forms. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us online, which can be found at the bottom of every page on the GSDSEF website.